when I was going through the literature, I found that about 30% of the patients in gynae OPD, they come with chronic pelvic pain, and an important clinical entity, which of course reaches to the vascular surgeons quite late once they manage them initially by the gynecologists or general surgeons, and finally end up with the vascular surgeons when they detect an underlying vascular pathology or venous pathology in the pelvis. Now, Dr. Dekiwadia, I don't think needs any introduction. Most of the members of VSI and VAI know him. He is a very senior member of both the associations. For those who are not from our association, I can just give a brief introduction of Dr. Dekiwadia. He is basically a cardiothoracic and vascular surgeon, and he did his MCH from PGI Chandigarh. And luckily, myself and Dr. Harinder Bedi, both of us were also there. We were together in PGI very long back, maybe 34 years back in 86, 87. Yeah, when he did his MCH and we were together. So our association is that long. So Dr. Dekiwadia, after doing his MCH, shifted back to his parent state, Gujarat, and joined medical college there, was in teaching faculty. And I think till 2002, he continued, and he left the teaching post in probably 2002, if I am not wrong, because his main interest was towards the vascular surgery. So he left the job and started his own private practice, established his own vascular surgery center, and he is doing excellent vascular work in that center. By this time, he has done more than probably 10,000 vascular procedures, both open as well as endovascular. In addition, I would like to say that he has a lot of interest in the venous problems. And all of us know that his pioneering work in the catheter-directed thrombolysis. So he has presented his work in so many conferences in India and abroad, and it has been appreciated widely. So today he'll be presenting about this relatively a topic which is relatively less discussed, and I think it will generate lot of interaction amongst the audience to know more and more about this pelvic congestion syndrome. So without wasting any time, I'll request Dr. Dekiwadia to present his lecture, and after that, I think Dr. Vivek will take you to the question answer session. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Vivek and Gurjeet. Thank you very much for the nice introduction. Let us go back now to the presentation. We were somewhere here. Is my presentation seen?
Not yet.
Not yet. So new share. I'll have to do a new share of the screen.
Yeah, we can see something.
Yeah. Now it's coming.
But here, okay. So we were here talking about, can you see the screen now?
Yeah.
Yes, sir, we can see.
Yeah, okay. And so then that was the time, and that is what was, the slides are not moving forward. Where are we? The slide is not moving forward here. Yes. So this morning when I was coming to the hospital, this magazine came in front of me. And that is where we, our general life gets attracted. Patients or human beings, all the same, and the doctors too. Well, I send greetings from Rajkot to all of you and wish you a healthy time, healthy life, and save from the present calamity that has happened. Let us go. There are a number of named veins in the pelvis. but more than the named veins, there are unnamed venous clusters in the pelvis. And this is where these clusters in the pelvis, they are known as venous plexus. For example, uterine venous plexus. This forms a delta of veins around an organ, and this results in multiple collateral pathways. This is commonest happening in the anatomy of pelvis, around uterus, around urinary bladder, around prostate, around sigmorectoid, and it is this place where large venous plexus exist, and the direction of flow of blood is not in a known pattern. So these are the complexes which we see in this area. This is a picture which was drawn by F. Natter, and he has tried to show so many venous complexes and plexus over here in this area. So what is pelvic venous congestion? It was first described in 1857 when it was labeled as an ovarian varicocele, and it was an autopsy finding. Then later on, it was termed and given a new term, which is known as non-cyclic pelvic pain. And then finally, recently, pelvic venous hypertension. So these are the words which are connected with the pelvic venous congestion. But if we understand the subject, it's a bit different than these three lines. So basic PCS, pelvic congestion syndrome, in general medical terms is defined as chronic pelvic pain resulting from reflux or obstruction of gonadal, gluteal or periuterine veins. This may be associated with visible perineal or vulvar varicose veins. So this is the basic understanding with which this pelvic congestion syndrome goes. But there is much beyond this also in this entire pathology. Pelvic vein congestion syndrome and pelvic congestion syndrome are synonyms. But additionally, if there is a pathology like prostatitis, which is associated with periprostatic venous congestion, it just goes into pelvic congestion syndrome. While if there are only isolated veins involved, sometimes the word pelvic vein congestion syndrome is used. Some audio disturbance.
Now it's okay now. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So both the terminologies are used almost with the same meaning. So that is important. Pelvic vein congestion and pelvic congestion. In the clinical diagnosis, little has been published in the literature. Few publications of pelvic congestion of symptomatic varices in the pubis, labia, perineum and gluteal region have been published. But important observation is 1 in every 10 patients with chronic venous disease has non-saphenous vein reflux. So the saphenofemoral junction, saphenopopliteal junction, these areas are normal. And yet there are varicose veins in the lower limb. So the source of such type of a reflux is often from the pelvic reflux, particularly when a close examination of vulvar or gluteal varicosities is made. So these are the odd types of veins which you see. You can see these veins running from the lateral aspect of the leg and knee level, and then they travel posterior in the thigh region, and then they disappear in the gluteal region. Often these are labeled as the congenital lateral venous plexus. But if you trace the varicosities, you will be able to visually see it going into the gluteal region. And then if you use an ultrasound probe to trace them further, you will be seeing that they go deeper and deeper till they are lost with your capacity of your linear. Another important thing is we must fully expose the patient to see other veins. Here is an example. Had I not seen this patient from all around, I would have missed this part. And you see, here it looks like an epicenter. There are veins going in all the direction. This is the zone of internal iliac vein. And here the pudendal plexus, the superior gluteal, inferior gluteal, all these veins are draining in this region. Third is a well-prepared area will make a lot of pubic veins visible, which would not be otherwise visible. And even a step further, whilst you examine a patient, you must make sure and see for small varicose veins very easily visible in the labial folds. So this is where the first impact of these pelvic veins refluxing comes into our clinical practice. Pelvic venous causes are overlooked because many physicians treating pelvic pain are unfamiliar with the pelvic venous signs. So when varicose veins are seen, either they are referred to the vein specialist or the person has come with a pelvic pain and it is thought that these veins have nothing to do with the pelvic pain and other investigations are done. As a condition is not widely discussed, many individuals may pass through expensive tests like MRI, CT, and even laparoscopy. But this falling blood has to be understood, and if it is made known to more and more medical practitioners, more focus will come on this subject. Pelvic congestion syndrome usually affects females more than males. Why? This is due to difference in the pelvic anatomy. 1, bladder, bowel, vagina, and pelvic floor. 2, most important, female pelvis undergoes anatomical changes in the lifetime. So these anatomical changes which happen, particularly during pregnancy, they leave a permanent mark and therefore a female faces a different pathophysiological atmosphere affecting deeper veins. So this is an important anatomical change. It happens cyclical with estrogen and progesterone congestion and relaxation. 1, 2, development of very common fibroids, etc. 3, pregnancies. And this pathophysiological atmosphere that affects the females more. But newer observations are demonstrating a male pelvic congestion syndrome. So there is a male PCS. Symptomatology and organ affected will be described in 2 sections pertaining to males and females. So we'll be discussing both, and then there are certain which are common to both. So the existing thinking is PCS is due to chronic pelvic venous hypertension attributed to ovarian internal iliac or left renal compression, resulting in a reflux and congestion of pelvic components and the pelvic varicose veins. This is the existing thinking. What is more, various factors that could affect pelvis venous system. 1 is gravity, infection, stretch and damage to the veins, physiologic venous congestion, gravid uterus, additionally common to all, vehicular accidents and external compression. Now let us see, when we talk of varicose veins in the lower limb, we talk about gravity. And this gravity brings this, and then the varicosities go like this and that, and ulcer and C1 and C2 and CEAP, everything. Think of the pelvis now. Here, again the gravity. Gravity brings the congestion here. And in addition, there is no calf pump-like mechanism available to push back the blood. So this problem of congestion is more grave than the lower limb, where the lower limb we talk of a peripheral heart and pump and this and that. Plus we have the superficial and deep system differently and the perforator system. This area is not studied well so far in this reference. So what is the impact of altered physiology and what is the impact of altered anatomy? These are very, very important few slides now coming in. Please focus on this. This is a reflux. This is known as a centrifugal reflux. And this is another reflux which is known as a centripetal reflux. Dear friends, the arterial hypertension, which is only centrifugal direction, in the infradiaphragmatic veins, here in the infradiaphragmatic veins, it is not necessarily unidirectional. So the arterial hypertension, we have, there's some noise coming in. Okay. Arterial hypertension is centrifugal in direction, whilst the infradiaphragmatic venous system hypertension would, there is some noise coming in. Can you help me?
Yes, sir. Like when someone joined, sometimes their mic is on, so that was this voice coming, but I muted now.
Okay, thank you. So the infradiaphragmatic venous system hypertension could be centrifugal as well as centripetal. So this is the most important observation in the venous hypertension and the physiologic changes which happen. Now, due to centrifugal hypertension effect coming into the veins, the impact comes on the pelvic varices, gonadal, uterine, vaginal, internal iliac, all these branches, they have the impact of the venous reflux. And this reflux can travel extra-pelvic through the linking points to the lower limbs, to the gonadal axis, through the round ligament, or the internal iliac axis, pudendal veins, obturator veins, gluteal veins, and even ischiatic veins. So this is how this reflux then finds its way. There are anatomical variations. See, the anatomical anomalies, 15% of the ovarian veins do not have valves. 90% of the internal iliac veins do not have valves. So these anomalies could be an additional role playing, as Guji said, that about 30% of the people walking to the gynae OPD with pelvic pain, they are having some sort of adjacent syndrome.
Somebody's mic is on.
Yeah. Now there could be mechanical compression. We'll be talking about all these compressions later on. The nutcracker syndrome, the May-Thurner syndrome, thrombus in the infra vena cava, or mass or a mass effect. You see, in the full-term pregnancy, there is edema of the lower limbs. Many times congested veins are seen. This is a physiological mass effect. But if really a pathological mass is there, which has not engulfed the varicose veins, the pelvic veins, but it is causing a pressure and a reflex cycle because of many collateral pathways into the veins. So the pelvic congestion syndrome is a complex, and the common presentation should be like this. Non-cyclic pelvic pain more than 6 months. Patient usually approaches gynecologist. 1/3 of all patients worked up for chronic pelvic pain up to laparoscopy. They don't find, no obvious etiology is found out. Some laparoscopic findings are labeled as varicose veins in the pelvis in laparoscopic findings, but no further advice is usually given. Exact incidence, therefore, exact incidence of females suffering from pelvic congestion syndrome is unknown because it is not checked. So, what common observation everybody should make? One is presence of vulvar varices. The picture I already showed. One, hypogastric vein area where varicosities are seen. This a gynecologist may not focus because most of the time they examine the patient in the recumbent position. But if the patient is referred to you, your first job is a full exposure and a complete visualization all around, inspecting for the veins. There are gonadal refluxes, gonadal vein refluxes. We will be talking on this thing after a short while when we talk about the investigation. And then there are certain incidences which are common to both the genders, like the compression of the left renal vein. Here, it's known as the mesoaortic compression between the supramesenteric artery and aorta, or between the aorta and the vertebral column. The left renal vein gets compressed, and that describes centrifugal type of a venous hypertension resulting into pelvic venous congestion. The another thing very well known is the May-Thurner syndrome. Most important to understand here, May-Thurner syndrome it need not necessarily be post-DVT. There could be no DVT, no non-thrombotic outcome. So there is no history of DVT, but there is a compression of the vein, and therefore many collaterals have developed, and this causes congestion in the pelvic organs. In yesterday, Deepak Selvaraj very well pointed out on this point. And if you can search these patients in your practice who do not have an history of DVT, but they have pelvic congestion, if you document pelvic congestion through venogram, deploying a stent over here will give you excellent long-term result. So, what is how the postpartum pelvic congestion syndrome develops? During pregnancy, the intravascular volume increases. The vein capacity can increase by 60%. This can cause valve incompetence. Weight gain and anatomic changes causes intermittent venous obstruction. So, besides this, estrogen is known to weaken the vein wall. So, this thing starts during pregnancy. And the classic presentation becomes pelvic and lower back pain. It is either intermittent or constant. It is worsened with standing, exercising. It increases premenstrually. She feels relieved in supine position and most relieved in the morning hours when awakening. So in the morning, she says, I am very much comfortable. As the day goes, I feel more and more discomfort. This is often exacerbated with intercourse, dyspareunia. And a dyspareunia may last for a week or more. When this type of cycle establishes, additional symptoms start coming up, the urinary tract symptoms, complaint of fullness or heaviness sensation deep in the pelvis, which she cannot explain. On examination, the vulvar and perineal varicosities may be found out. And this is a source of lower extremity varicosities in more than a quarter of a week. There are two pathological forms in the female PCS. One is the premenstrual form and another is the chronic pelvic congestion and dysmenorrhea form. Both of these are thought to be due to combination of endocrine and mechanical factors. Most patients with PCS are premenopausal. Persistent pain for years and dyspareunia. This results into depression, personality changes, and secondary psychological stresses. This was evaluated by a retrospective review of patients with non-thrombotic venous outflow obstruction with symptoms of PCS. So this is the ultimate outcome of a pelvic congestion syndrome. Let us go to the male PCS. In males, we do not have tests at the moment that allows a good understanding of this complex problem. But availability of IVUS is allowing us a better understanding of the problem. Internal iliac venous reflux can cause prominent varicose veins. This is also linked with erectile dysfunction, linked with hemorrhoids. And varicose veins in gluteal and perineal area, these are the hallmarks of the complaints of the male complex. The testicular veins are never the cause. The varicocele, testicular varicocele is never the cause, whilst an ovarian varicocele is the cause. Conditions of the prostate, prostatodynia or chronic pelvic pain syndrome associated with non-specific voiding symptoms located around groin, genitalia and perineum. There is no pus or bacteria in the urine or prostatic fluid. This causes chronic congestion around prostate. Prostatitis, again chronic non-bacterial prostatitis with pelvic myoneuropathy, pain in the pelvis, back, rectum or penis, sexual difficulties and pain with sitting. Proctalgia fugax, described as anal Charlie horse, occurs after sexual activity, brief painful spasm of the pelvic floor muscles. Decreased libido and erectile function can also be additionally caused by pelvic congestion. See, in old age, decreased libido and erectile dysfunction is due to another causes. But when in a younger generation this is found out, pelvic congestion should be sorted for. We'll come to this further a little later. So erectile function, which is pelvic venous congestion, can disturb arousal induced by nitric oxide and cytokine release. Now this cytokine release occurs when there is inflammation, and inflammation occurs when there is venous congestion. So pelvic venous congestion, cytokine release, and arousal by nitric oxide is dampened. So what vasodilatation should happen, vasoconstriction happens. Due to this, the erectile function may result. New studies are going on this thing. There is no final answer found out, but it is in this direction where the male PCS is being studied. Post-prostate cancer treatment, chemotherapy or radiotherapy can result in fibrosis and periprostatic venous congestion. So these are few factors of male PCS where ultrasonography is very, very much helpful. Other conditions pertaining to both the genitalia, we have talked about this, the nutcracker syndrome. Newer observation in pelvic congestion. H. pylori infection could migrate to the colon under the influence of antibiotic violence. Too much of antibiotic prescription, slowly H. pylori from the stomach now attacks the colon. As H. pylori settles in the colon, it leads to accumulation of ammonia. Accumulation of the ammonia in the colon is toxic and it could lead to pelvic congestion. So this is studied. This was earlier studied by the Egyptian and it has been mentioned in the Arabic literature years back. And they had a cupping therapy for this thing where they would let out blood from the perineum. I have no further details about it, but this condition was known, something happening. It was this H. pylori. Musculoskeletal dysfunctions like chronic congestion, which leads to pelvic floor disorders. Here there is a referred pain pattern. Low back, thighs, suprapubic, abdominal and pelvic region. There are 3 syndromes described. Levator-Ani syndrome, coccydynia and pudendal neuralgia. So recently, now latest in the vascular news, we found that hemorrhoids are also related and thought to be a part of the pelvic venous congestion. So studies are going on this thing. And at present, the first study which has come out is pertaining to hemorrhoids in the females, because PCS is more common in females or more commonly observed or now more diagnosed in females. However, it could equally be affecting the male population also. So one has to think outside the venous component of the pelvic vein congestion syndrome when you see association of colonic H. pylori strain in the pelvic pathology. Role of inflammatory cytokines and the effect on nitric oxide in erectile dysfunction. All this could be related to the pelvic vein congestion syndrome. Investigation for imaging, ultrasonography, the hallmark. Transvaginal ultrasound performed in supine and upright position with or without valsa is the test for pelvic vein reflux. It can detect reflux, measure the diameter of ovarian, renal and even iliac veins, and it is high sensitivity. Here is an example. This demonstrates ovarian reflux, ovarian veins, transvaginal ultrasound, veins more than 5 millimeter. This is a norm. So transvaginal color Doppler ultrasound examination is most important investigation for the primary evaluation. What are the other things? In males also, prostatitis syndromes, cryptogenic hematuria, all these are studied by ultrasound. Pudendal plexus, retrovesicular plexus, prostatic capsular vein evaluation, all done through transperineal Doppler flow imaging. And the blood flow images are under studies. So this is being done by the urologist and the people who are practicing the prostate and the pelvic, uropelvic specialty. They are using the Doppler ultrasound for evaluating the veins, and the perineum is used for this. I tried to search literature, but I don't know whether transrectal ultrasonography has yet come into vogue or they have done something on it or not. CT venogram is useful only for initial screening study. It has no deeper value. But gadolinium enhanced 3D magnetic resonance venography is almost 100% sensitive in detecting large gonadal veins associated with varices. So this could be a confirmatory thing if a transvaginal investigation is insufficient or you are suspecting something in a male. The MRV, when combined with MRI of the pelvis, so MRI and MRV both when they are combined, they will exclude other causes of pelvic pain like fibroid, endometriosis, adenomyosis, etc. It's an excellent modality for information on chronic pelvic pain. The anatomic information provides an excellent roadmap prior to venography and embolization. So this is a picture of MRI and MRV where you can see a large gonadal vein and the congestion caused by this vein in this area, and other pathologies are excluded when other organs are studied. We had done a study and analysis of venous duplex for varicose vein in females between 20 and 50, and 154 cases we had studied at my center. And we found out that the risk factors here were obesity, female, and pregnancy. So female gender, obesity, and pregnancy. Other factors we found were pelvic surgery, phlebitis, and prolonged standing or habit of heavy lifting. The Mazdoor comb, where they have to do a lot of heavy lifting work. And the clinical observations I've already shown you, the posterior thigh veins, gluteal and vulval. The vulval veins were the largest in percentage, 42% of all this. The patterns of reflux were very, very important. How and where this reflux was going and traveling. Here was incompetent saphenofemoral junction and a standard routine GSV varicose vein, transvaginal episode. Here, this reflux coming from the pelvis. So it is here, this was one pattern we observed. The other pattern we observed was SFJ was competent. There was nothing wrong here, but there were varicosities which are primarily going in the gluteal region and a large reflux which was shown on transvaginal ultrasonography. The third pattern was the pelvic veins had a mild reflux, hardly anything, and the saphenofemoral junction was incompetent. So here the transvaginal picture does not show a lot of refluxing veins. There are 4 treatment methods. One is the medical treatment. Antibiotics, maybe intermittent courses of antibiotics to control infection. Anti-inflammatory medicines, treatment of erectile dysfunction in males, and venotonics like micronized pulverized flavonoid fraction. These venotonics that decrease the stasis, reduce the inflammation, improve the venous tone, resulting in improved pelvic circulation and pain relief. So these are probably the mainstay of the pelvic pain in the current medical management. There are endovascular options for the treatment where there is an ovarian vein reflux. Here there is a large ovarian vein reflux causing this ovarian varicose veins. You can see an ovarian varicocele, and the veins are spreaded over the fundus of the uterus with multiple coiling done through transfemoral route and coming to the left renal vein and down. Here the reflux is abolished. This is a picture where you can understand here the catheter goes from the IVC into the left renal vein, into the ovarian vein, left ovarian vein. See the number of coils that might be used. So this is an old, relatively old method. Newer methods we are injecting foam, somebody is injecting glue, somebody is injecting lesser number of this thing. But the aim is that you should be able to ablate the entire reflux path. My dear friends, here I am posing a question to you. Do not answer now, we will discuss it. You see the saphenofemoral junction, reflux and downgrade development of veins is no. Here there is no such junction. Here the varicosities arise here and the venous drainage is in this direction. How come this vein becomes then incompetent and goes on adding? I am trying to understand it. We will discuss this one. Other treatment options is venous angioplasty and stenting in the May-Turner syndrome here. So this is before there were a lot of collaterals causing congestion. After deployment of the stent, here the collaterals have disappeared and there is a smooth flow in the May-Turner syndrome. Treatment option 4, surgery, the Nutcracker syndrome. In the Nutcracker syndrome, temporary relief can occur after simple angioplasty or stent deployment, but long-term benefit comes from surgery. To add to my honesty, I have so far never operated any case for Nutcracker syndrome. I have done venoplasty in one case. But these are the book pictures where various types of patchwork and transposition of the vein and the artery, and this has all been depicted. But for Nutcracker syndrome, the literature says that surgery is the primary answer. Endovascular so far has not given comparable results as surgery. So in our series, what we did, the treatment modality was out of 41 patients, 10 patients, coil deployment in 6 patients. 3 patients with ovarian reflex and extensive incompetent SFJ, endovenous laser ablation and coil. 28 patients where the SFJ was incompetent and mild pelvic vein, we treated with endovenous laser ablation of the saphenous vein, kept in regular follow-up for persistence of symptoms of pelvic pain. So this was the approach which we had planned in our series. Recently in our YCON at Mumbai, there was a beautiful talk given by Dr. Louis, and he showed us clinical simplified classification. There are no, in the pelvis, P0, no symptoms, P1, lower dorsal pain, P2, dysuria, dysmenorrhea, and then P3, severe grade of all this. But important part is lower dorsal pain, pelvic discomfort, dysuria, dysmenorrhea, dyspareunia. These are the main symptoms of pelvic venous congestion. Many references have also been given. Many people have tried pelvic vein embolization and then venous reflux from pelvis and vulvoperineal region as a possible cause of lower extremity, or as a pelvic venous reflux as a contributing as a major thing. So there are literature, there are studies going on. I think with now with these webinars coming in, see right now so many of us are watching this, about 69 people. Why can't we all get together and make a study and add our data, what were our findings, what were the gynec findings, whatever ways, what was the outcome of medical management. I propose that we should be able to do these things very well. The follow-up of these patients' effect of any form of treatment should be routinely reassessed because of the plexiform nature of the recurrent venous disorders. So if you've done ovarian vein coiling, you think everything is okay, that may not be. New pathways would also be there, or some new pathology or persisting pathology may be there. So a surveillance is most important in pelvic vein syndrome. That is what we have learned. And in our clinic, we have done that any patient who has come for treatment of chronic pelvic pain and we have done any form of a treatment, all the follow-ups are free. We don't charge them, even ultrasound, we don't charge them. And they do keep on coming. We maintain a register what happened. If we had done a venoplasty, is it patent or not? Then we see what are the respiratory patterns, all these things. And they do come up. Very few don't turn up. So we should make an attempt. See, the pathogenesis of pelvic congestion syndrome is to be understood very well as the mind flows into this particular condition. There is a primary pelvic congestion syndrome, which is due to increase in the vein capacity, due to multiple pregnancies, an effect of estrogen in the female genital, and prostatic, periprostatic, and some bladder pathology in the male genital. This make the primary pelvic congestion. And then comes the secondary pelvic congestion, which is due to obstructing anatomic anomalies May-Turner syndrome, Nutcracker syndrome, retroaortic compression, whatever is, these are secondary pelvic congestions. So the primary pelvic congestion syndrome, the pathological approach and the physiological changes would be different. So need not necessarily mean that every time you should have a history of TVT, or you should have a swollen leg or an ulcer, and then only you look into the pelvis. No, you look into the pelvis for any pelvic pain. And per se, I would recommend any female patient coming to you and you make a clinical examination, make sure you see the suprapubic area very well. Maybe you might need to repair that part. Look into the labial folds for any veins before the patient comes and tells that, look, here there are some veins and I am uncomfortable about them. So my take-home message, dear friends, at this would be that females with postpartum varicosities, vulval varicosities, posterior thigh and gluteal varicosities, and varicosities with suprapubic tenderness should definitely be screened through transvaginal ultrasound probe to search for a reflux besides the standard ultrasonography. And my take-home message number 2, males also have a pelvic congestion syndrome, and this syndrome does exist in males. That also has to be known. I'm really thankful to all of you for having joined this webinar, and I'll be too happy to answer questions. Let us discuss more. Let us know more about experience from everybody. Over to Gurjeet and Vivek. Thank you very much for the opportunity given to me.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for such a lucid and very informative presentation, sir. I think as an audience, all of us would have been enlightened, and especially about this very elusive and enigmatic topic like pelvic congestion syndrome. And seeing vascular surgeons, in fact, not many people come forward with this kind of diagnosis. Especially it lies with us to diagnose such patients who come with pelvic congestion syndrome. So thank you so much. And I would invite the members who joined in on this webinar. If they have any questions, they can please put it forward to Dr. Dekiwadia.
Dr. Dekiwadia, yes, I want to ask a question. If the PCS is on the right side,
Yes.
Is it the same to tackle it as on the left side, or it is more difficult?
It is more difficult because if you have to see the PCS, what you are talking is congestion on the right side of ovaries dominantly, and you are probably indicating towards the right ovarian vein reflux. So if you want to reach the left ovarian vein through the left renal vein, it is very, very simple. You definitely enter into the left renal vein. Your catheter once goes in, it will slide in into the refluxing left vein. But to the right gonadal vein directly is a tributary of the inferior vena cava. So here it is very, very difficult. Sometimes you'll have to come transjugular or use different types of catheter, because a check shoot will not help you. In the arteries, a check shoot helps you. That where is the artery going?
Yeah.
Here you don't have that facility.
Yeah.
So it is more challenging and more demanding in your skills. Yes.
Thank you very much, and I would like to give the compliment that you have done the full justice to the topic. Thank you.
Thank
Dr.
you.
Saravanan, please.
Yes. Yes, sir.
Unmute your.
Deki, fantastic presentation.
Thank you very much.
One question for you regarding the treatment part of it.
Yeah.
See, it's a difficult situation to treat it. It's a difficult condition to treat. Recurrence rate is very high. You were talking about embolization of the ovarian vein alone, right?
Yes.
Will that alone enough, or you have to do the iliac vein compression? You have to check for it always and do both at the same time.
Oh, yes, definitely. A very good question. Very, very rightly asked. I should have talked about it. If you see reflux into the ovarian vein, do not take it for granted that this is the only reflux. This is somewhere akin where you have a high flow malformation. You know, there are many feeding centers. So to the ovary also, besides the ovarian vein, tributaries of the internal iliac vein also are a major contributory factor to that. Not only that, sometimes it is the left ovarian you will find refluxing, but then there are venous plexus, and this plexus could be even connected with the right side. So simply if you do the left ovarian vein, it is not the answer. So whenever you do coiling, you must check into reflux into the internal iliac veins, and you, after having deployed your coils and stopped everything, you must take check shoots in both the internal iliac veins, whether the reflux is there, whether the congestion continues or not. It is very important. It's a very important.
Thank you.
Question by Preeti.
Yeah. Good evening, sir. This is
Yeah.
Preeti from Hyderabad, sir.
Yeah.
Actually, the talk was really very nice.
Thank you.
Now, certain basic things I would just like to confirm from how you did the studies, because I have started a similar study.
Okay.
And to increase the patient numbers, I have spoken with the gynecologist and urologist, but the initial problem is for them also to identify and pick it up and send to me is a big challenge.
Correct.
So coming to the after it has been diagnosed as it's the primary PCS.
Right.
So how do you go about the treatment options of undergoing a medical versus some interventional procedure? Like whether you see it's the size of the ovarian veins or what is the grade of the reflux, and on that basis you manage, or how do you go about it, sir?
Okay. Yeah, Preeti, thank you for this nice question. Number one, even after having having made a lot of efforts, I am still not able to convince my gynec friends.
True, sir.
And they think that the veins are not important because in our early postgraduate teachings, you pick up any vein to enter. You pick up anything, say even the dorsum of the hand, which is contraindicated. But here, just take the vein here. If that is not available, take the long saphenous vein at the medial malleolus. And that has given a deep impact that the veins are not important because there are plenty. That's number one. Today also I had requested a large number of gynecologists to join the webinar. I will check later on how many really did. So when your vein practice goes up, it should be us who should be able to leave the message in the society. And I use in my clinical practice, any female patient with varicose veins, I told you that you must examine the external genitalia very well, number one. The protocol is that a nurse must be standing near you when you are doing the ultrasonography. I make additionally sure that one lady relative of that patient is also standing there. And there, at least one more is conveyed of the message. Of these ladies who are standing, more than half of them turn up for an ultrasound examination. Yes, साहब मुझे भी देख लो कुछ है या नहीं है. And these are done free for them. I do free examination because this is to convey the message. This is how we could gather 174 patients in a short time. Now, in reference to the treatment modality, I had shown in all the three, if there is a dominant pelvic reflux, but there is not saphenofemoral reflux going on, we treat the ovarian reflux first, number one. If there is ovarian reflux as well as the great saphenous reflux, we treat both. There were 3 cases like this. But in the third, there is a mild pelvic reflux and the dominant reflux is the saphenofemoral. Here we definitely for saphenofemoral will do endovenous ablation and we will definitely give anti-inflammatory, a short course of antibiotics and the MPFF, what I mentioned.
Yeah.
In these patients, we keep on checking the urine and the urine has to be checked before the menses because it is at that time the pH changes happen. And if there is a mild urinary infection, intermittent courses of antibiotics, that is what I have to do.
Thank you, sir. So one last question. Now
Please.
we have done a endovenous ablation of the varicosities, and patient has come out with a recurrent varicose veins after a couple of years. And then we investigate, and then we find that there are probably ovarian reflux which was there either primarily or
Yes.
it has occurred after the pregnancy, which has occurred after the ablation, sir.
Exactly, it can happen.
So in that case, how would you differentiate what is to be done for a recurrent, like it is not a truncal reflux, but it is just a reflux for the legs, which can be managed probably by a sclerotherapy or by compression. But we see that the pelvic reflux has come up. So
Yeah.
is it that the first scenario in which the varicose veins were not been diagnosed as if it was because of the pelvic, or it has come after procedure related to some pregnancies and also would the management change there, sir?
Yeah, okay. Here, when the patient was operated first for endovenous ablation, at that time there were no pelvic varicosities. After pregnancy, they came. So, this one, the patient has a tendency for varicose veins, either a hereditary or something. There is some factor, which is a different story altogether. Now the patient has developed some varicosities, particularly in the thigh and the genitalias. Do a transvaginal ultrasound. If the refluxing veins are more than 5 millimeters, right? See during Valsalva. Even do a transvaginal in a supine position. Standing, sab dikhega, everything you will see. But in lying down also, if you see, lying down and a small cough reflux. Valsalva, you don't train, you just may ask them to make a small cough reflux. And you see large veins, treat them first. That is absolute indication. One. Two, if there is mild reflux, this could still be a pathway which I showed that during pregnancy this can happen, and the pathway can come through the pudendal veins and all those things, you know. Then you do a sclerotherapy. If the pelvic reflux is small, don't go for a big procedure like coiling. If the reflux is big, main, then do it. Otherwise, sclerotherapy. And whenever you do a sclerotherapy, first line you must tell to the patient, this could be required more than once.
Yes.
So when you repeat that word, they are then convinced.
Sure. Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot, sir.
Dr. Dekiwadia.
Yeah.
Hello, sir. Congratulations on a very nice talk.
Thank you. Thank you, Rahul.
And sir, can I just add 2 points just for the audience?
I'll be too happy. I'll be too happy.
So one is there is a SEEP classification now, as we know, for the pelvic congestion syndrome, and which is available now on the internet also, and we can circulate it to all the members. There is a new SEEP classification for pelvic congestion. And second point is there is a UIP consensus document on pelvic congestion published in August 2019. I feel anybody who's interested in this, they must go through this. It's a fantastic document, and it's around 18 pages. Very nice document to read.
I think I've taken some portion from that write-up also.
Yeah. It's a very nice document.
Yeah.
Thank you.
One
Sir.
thing I like to clarify, Dr. Dekiwadia, from you.
Yeah.
You spoke about the role of laser. So, is it being used for the pelvic veins?
Oh, no, never. See,
Right.
in the study what we made, we found out that there were a number of patients who had primary, means dominant ovarian vein reflux. And their saphenofemoral junctions were normal. So they were subjected to ovarian vein coiling. There was another set of patients who had ovarian reflux as well as incompetent saphenofemoral junction.
That was taken care by laser.
Yes, that was that. So the pelvic vein laser is not done. No.
Right.
You see, I can tell you a funny example. When I did the first ovarian coiling, I was not very much used to it. So I thought the ovarian vein must be very small and this and that, and I took a 2 millimeter coil. And that was the biggest blunder I did. And as I deployed the coil, it went on floating, you know. It was looking like that drop of ink which you put in a glass of water, slowly going down in a ring. and it disappeared somewhere in the pelvis. I was frightened what happened. I could not find it anywhere by any other fluoroscopy. But then I learned that, you know, you have to use
Yeah, sir.
large diameter coils.
I
Thank you.
think the usual protocol is for extremities, we can use the lasers, the RFAs. But for the organ specific and pelvic venous plexuses, I think coiling or sclerotherapy or embolization, these are the usual modalities of it.
Yes.
Any more questions from the audience?
Dr. Deki,
Yeah.
firstly, wonderful to see you.
Thank
I
you.
enjoyed that talk. Hello from Singapore.
Yeah, I was just, your face was not very clear. I said Sriram is not happy with me today. He didn't join. Lovely.
No, I did. I've been there from the beginning. I was even there for the original Servier slide.
Oh, okay.
So
okay.
I've been there throughout the talk.
Anyway, thank
And
you.
I've even sent you a text, although I think your phone is off because it's not been received.
No, I have not seen it. Yes.
That's okay. It's not nothing. It's a private text. Please don't read it in public.
Okay. Okay.
a
Ram,
couple of things.
you will be able to add so many things to our thinking. I think that.
Yeah, well,
enrich
I
us
really
more.
enjoyed the talk, and I'm so glad that the talk has happened and there is interest in it. And it's funny. I came back to your talk after just having seen someone who I coiled 6 months ago for pelvic congestion on a follow-up. A couple of things on the approach. Firstly, the primary and secondary pelvic congestion. About 10% is primary estrogen related, and about 90% is a compression syndrome of some sort. So that was one point. So most are compressions, and of the compressions, we now know that about 2/3 are iliac venous in origin, and about 1/3 are renal vein in origin. There was a question that came from Sandeep about right-sided ovarian vein embolization.
Yes.
Primary involvement of the right ovarian vein, I mean, we've done a lot now. We do 3 to 5 pelvic congestions a month, except now in this COVID period when everything, all elective work has shut down. But leading up to about January, we do quite a few. Primary right-sided ovarian venous involvement is extremely rare, and it is for this reason that it drains into the IVC. You get it either in people who've had multiple pregnancies. It's almost always primary in origin and have very large ovarian veins in general, or in people who have something higher up in the IVC, like an IVC web, or a previous IVC thrombus, something that has not been recognized. But it is rare to need to coil the ovarian vein primarily. The left side, of course, because of its anatomy, is involved in the nutcracker mechanism. In India, I suspect it will be even rarer to see the ovarian vein on the left involved, because you see, nutcracker manifests itself in very thin women. It does not occur in so much in fat women. There is an aortomesenteric fat pad between which it's caught. If they're very thin, the fat pad is lost and the nutcracker becomes worse. So it is rare to see a nutcracker in a relatively well-built population. Of course, when you look at the 18 BMI Chinese population, it's a bit commoner. On the other hand, people who put on weight, the omental fat descends into the pelvis, and then that makes the iliac compression even worse. In addition to adding pressure from what's called the Starling effect, intra-abdominal pressure rises. So I suspect in our practice in Asia, and India in particular, the likelihood of having iliac vein compression is more common. One must understand the anatomy of that venous axis. So it is the internal iliac vein, the broad ligament veins, the parametrial or uterine veins, the ovarian vein. It's one continuous axis. Do not assume that a dilated ovarian vein is because there is a renal vein compression. You can have retrograde dilatation of the ovarian vein because there's an iliac venous compression. And in particular, there were two pictures shown by Dr. Deki, two angios that you showed. There was one in which you mentioned the arcuate veins across the uterus, on the fundus of the uterus. That is typical of a primary, or not primary, of a left-sided ovarian venous reflux. You do not usually see that in an iliac venous obstruction. On the other hand, you also showed another one, the May-Turner angio you showed, where instead of there being arcuate veins, you can see the iliolumbar veins like this running across. That is typical of a May-Turner type non-thrombotic iliac venous compression. So the way we approach it is when someone presents to us, whether they're presented after having been played around by the gynecologist or whether they come in with a primary venous problem in the leg, and you can tell when you examine them, and Dr. Deki was so clear, you must examine them completely. As soon as you see, you can tell from the extra anatomical sites of the veins, you know, the vulvar veins, the perineal veins, or the lateral veins, or the gluteal veins, that the pelvis is probably involved in this case. But we don't immediately start by saying, oh, you have varicose veins, good, was sex painful last night? If you have that kind of question, that's the end of your practice. You have to break the ice a bit. So we, and it is an accepted questionnaire, it has been published, we use a PCS questionnaire. And I will try and show it to you from today's case. I don't know if you can see it on my phone, but I will try. Let me see if I can show it to you. 1 second. Just give me a second. I'll try and show this, what the questionnaire looks like. Yes, okay. So it looks a bit like this. I don't know how well you all can see this.
You better narrate. You narrate it.
Okay, I'll narrate it to you. Essentially, it's got 6 questions. And it's available. I can send it out to people. I'll send it to Dr. Deki and we can show it to others. It's got 6 questions. Do you have pain that is related to the menses? Is it cyclical? Is the pain do you have increased pain on sitting or standing? Is the pain in the perineum? Are there associated varicose veins? Is the pain associated with hematuria? That's an important question, and I'll tell you why. Is there a pain related to sexual intercourse? It's not coital pain, but it is the post-coital pain that is almost diagnostic. And even more diagnostic, and fortunately a very, very, very rare symptom, but absolutely diagnostic, is, I apologize to all the ladies here, is a symptom known as non-stimulated genital excitation. They are excited without being excited. It sounds funny. I can see people might smile about this, but it is actually not pleasant at all. They feel dirty, they feel guilty, they can't talk about it to anybody, and it's an extremely distressing symptom. But that is because of chronic congestion in the venous side of the pelvis. So we start with the questionnaire, and if they score 3 out of 6 with at least 6 months of pelvic pain, or 4, 5, and 6, then they are sent for a transvaginal, transabdominal duplex. That has to be done with 6 hours of starvation, otherwise the ovarian vein is not seen because of bowel gas. And they come in with the full bladder, then you start the exam, then you empty the bladder, and then you complete the examination. And there are some things you're looking for in the transvaginal duplex. Firstly, you're looking for reversal of direction of flow in the internal iliac vein. The direction of flow should be towards the external iliac and out. You're looking for reversal of flow. The second thing you're looking for is loss of phasicity in the internal iliac venous flow. Nikos Labropoulos showed that the absence of phases, the presence of phasicity does not rule out obstruction. You can have phasicity even with obstruction. But the absence of phasicity is diagnostic of obstruction. So if you have a May-Turner, you will have no phasicity in the internal iliac. Then you're looking for slow flow, less than 4 centimeters per second of flow. And you're looking for a 5 or 6 mm ovarian vein with reflux. So this is what you look for. And then we go in prepared to do both iliac as well as ovarian intervention. I IVUS down to the pelvic brim on the ovarian vein, and we pull the IVUS back. The IVUS catheter goes in quite easily, actually. And Dr. Dekhi was right. The sizes can be quite significant. I've had to actually put 12 mm plug, vascular plug, because the coils weren't that big, and use AVP plug in order to block the ovarian vein once. So it's something to remember that the ovarian vein can be very, very large, and that the symptom complex has to be built in. And iliac venous is probably more common a cause of pelvic congestion than the ovarian vein, especially in Asian populations where we tend to enjoy our samosas a bit more than we should.
Thank you so much,
Thank you, Shriram.
Shriram, for your valuable contribution to the topic.
Thank you.
Now I'll request my co-panelist, Dr. Vivek Singh, for his comments, and then I think he can conclude the session if there are no more questions.
Can I add one more point? Not because Servier is supporting this, but genuinely.
Sure.
There is evidence coming out, and it is our practice, but there is actually evidence coming out that high dose MPFF is part of the treatment. It is now routine for us to give 2 grams a day, 1 gram BD. Unlike we do in varicose vein work, where we give 500 milligrams twice or 1 gram a day, we double the dose for the first month and then go to 1 gram a day in patients who've been treated for pelvic congestion. And their recovery from symptoms is much quicker. And it is important to warn the patient that if they wake up the next morning, don't expect to be okay. It takes 2 or 3 cycles before it all settles down. It doesn't settle down the next morning. You're not going to be pain-free. It will take some time.
Which is the subset of patients where you would give 2 grams of MPFF?
All patients who are intervened in post-op, whether it's ovarian or whether it's iliac venous. The problem with the pelvic system, as you said quite rightly, is that there is no facial envelope. There is no calf pump. And so the fibrotic change and the perifibrotic inflammation, the macrophage, the perivascular cuffing that we know that takes place with venous hypertension, there is no quick solution to it in the pelvis. And so we prefer to give a higher dose because we know MPFF does this. It stops macrophage activity, it reduces perivenous inflammation, it reduces perivascular cuffing, and it seems to work well. But there are now studies going on formally on it. But our standard is to use a higher dose of MPFF in the first month after, and then carry on with the lower dose. And it is the same dose that's used for hemorrhoid surgery, actually. It's 2 grams a day.
What percentage of our patients after these interventions get a long-term symptomatic relief?
Surprisingly good. You will be surprised how good the symptom scores are. We follow the symptom scores with using the PCSS score. We want it to come down to 0. It is important to understand that if you do an ovarian vein intervention for an iliac venous obstruction, don't expect to see symptoms improve dramatically. And the other way around as well. You've got to localize the spot from which it is coming. And one more thing, ovarian vein embolization in the younger lady who may be anticipating birth, having more children. Please do not, our practice is not to use any implant, no coiling. We use an over-the-wire Fogarty balloon, bring it as far down as you can, and do a balloon-controlled foam sclerotherapy. You will buy enough time because the problem is in pregnancy, the ovarian vein will dilate. It can go up 18 to 24 times the volume of blood flow in the pelvis. And the ovarian vein will dilate, and you'll put in a 6 or 8 mm coil. When they are pregnant, you may be taking the coil out of the right heart. It is not worth the trouble. So we prefer not to leave implants if they are possibly going to have children, and do balloon control foam sclerotherapy. It's not perfect. They might need another procedure sometime in the future, but I do not want to be responsible for a right atrial ovarian coil. I would prefer to avoid that.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
I think now we
Dr.
should.
Vivek, I have one more question to Dr. Dekhi Wadia.
Please, sir,
Yeah.
please.
Thank you. Dr. Dekhi, sir, when the patient of a female comes to our OPD with the history of the old extensive DVT, iliac vein is occluded or maybe the IVC is occluded, and we
Yes.
see the veins on the anterior abdominal wall, vulval vein, pelvic vein, lateral gluteal vein, suprapubic vein. Immediately we say they are the secondary veins because of the obstruction of the common iliac vein or the IVC. So how we will differentiate, as you have shown in your picture, that there are the veins on the anterior abdominal wall?
You see, when the IVC gets occluded, at that time you commonly see bilateral. It's not a unilateral phenomenon. If it is in the iliac system, internal iliac, external iliac, common iliac, usually you see on one side. Number one. Number two, if you trace this, because when the IVC is occluded, the central path is occluded from the entire lower half of the body. So you have to look into the loin veins. You might find infra-axillary veins, additional veins going around the chest. So these other veins have to be sorted out. And to comfortably see these veins, make the patient, expose the patient well, make the patient lie down, and then do a Trendelenburg angle. So more blood will flow into those pathways and the veins will become apparent. This needs a relatively relaxed OPD day. In your hospital where there is a flow of patients, you can't manage to do that. But seeing bilateral, it should be the first clue.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Just a comment to you, Sandeep.
Yeah.
It is extremely unlikely you will see a pelvic congestion in someone who is post-thrombotic. Iliac or iliofemoral thrombosis almost never leads to a pelvic congestion. We don't know why,
Because
but it
already all the
almost
veins are
never
occluded.
does. It is usually a functional obstruction of the iliac vein with an overlying compression, but they haven't actually thrombosed off completely yet.
But,
When they have an iliofemoral thrombosis, it is rare to see a pelvic congestion in women, but it is commoner to see pelvic congestion in men after you get an iliac venous thrombosis. And I'm so glad Dr. Dekhi Wadia mentioned it. As you know, we do that venous erectile dysfunction work, and there is a 40% association with male pelvic congestion that we have picked up as well. So thank you for mentioning it. It's a young man's disease, that it's not an old man's disease.
Okay.
So the question you asked is, it's very unlikely you will see, if you see the veins, as Dr. Dekhi said, if the IVC is occluded, you're essentially looking at parallel lines running up the side of this patient.
Okay.
well, Ram, what you talked about the young group of people getting involved in erectile dysfunction, I think anybody who has joined this webinar, everybody is young, so one has to be careful. And
Not
I
me.
have, Ram, I have been observing that post-thrombotic female patients who come for follow-up, after 1 year, we often see vulval veins. We often see
Yes.
vulval veins, and we do see reflux coming through the vulval veins into the saphenofemoral junction and then traveling down below. So
Yes.
I might differ slightly. For
No,
the
no, no.
Indian
I agree
population.
with that. I agree with that. You will see visible varicosities. I don't deny that. You will see, because as you know, you have the G point, the I point, the P point, and the O point, the gluteal point, the obturator point, the perineal point, and the inguinal point. These are the
But
four
they-
leak points.
they-
in pelvic.
they do-
They come
they-
out of there. But what I mean was post-thrombotic, the syndrome of pelvic heaviness, chronic pelvic pain, dyspareunia, that doesn't seem to be there so much in terms of symptoms, but you have a whole host of visible veins that are in the vulvar and the
Yeah.
groin region. I agree with you. I agree with you.
Then the younger ones who have a DVT post-cesarean, post-cesarean DVT iliofemoral, thrombolysis done, everything going very well, keeps on follow. After 1 year, when we see they do have varicose veins and they do complain of pelvic pain, and they are getting investigated for the pelvic pain, though I do not have a good study or a statistical analysis on this thing, but this is a definite clinical observation in the population in this region of the world.
I'm sure. No, but it's not commonly seen by us.
Maybe.
Right.
So, sir, I think we are at the fag end of the session now, and I would like to close this down the session with a closing statement. So, brought out topic by Dr. Devendra Devikivadia, sir, and very informative session we had, sir. I would like to thank the other panelists, Dr. Gurjeet, and the fellow members who joined for the today's session. So, thank you very much, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.